Paul Nuttall, I'm going to start with the same question that I put to Jonathan Bartley just a short while ago, and that's your response to what Theresa May has said in the light of the events last night, the shocking events on the streets of London, that she thinks the country needs to have a completely different approach to extremism and terrorism. Do you agree with her?
I do agree with it, actually. It's something I've been calling for quite a long time. It's quite interesting to hear Theresa May finally identify what the problem is, because we've had politician after politician in this country who's refused to accept that the problem is an Islamist ideology. Now, Islamism isn't Islam. It's not about Muslims. Islamism is a political ideology. It's an ideology of violence. And I was glad to hear Theresa May today speak about Islamist extremism, because that is at the heart of the problem.
What are you proposing, though, in concrete terms?
Well, firstly, what we need to do is we need to ensure that there's more police officers on the beat. We want to see 20,000 more police officers, because we believe community policing is important. If people are going to pass on information, they're more likely to pass it on to a policeman within their local community. Equally, what we need to see is the Muslim community itself sign up to the Prevent programme, because at the moment, only 1 in 8 referrals to Prevent come from within the Muslim community.
But you support the Prevent?
Yes, I do. But obviously there is a breakdown of trust. And what we need to do is to rebuild it. And finally, I think we also have to look at the Saudi or Qatari funding of mosques. Saudi Arabia basically spread hatred and radicalism and violence around the globe. And we have to look at the funding of mosques in this country by Saudis and Qataris.
Let's take our first question from the audience, from James Carmichael. James.
You recently said that detention without trial should be considered for terror suspects. Isn't this fundamentally against British values of justice?
What I said is that nothing should be taken off the table. I also spoke about return to control orders and tagging, because, look, the safety of British civilians, and last night in Manchester, and indeed the Westminster attack proves this, is more important than the human rights of any would-be jihadi. And what we have to do is accept that we're now living in a different world. We're living in a dangerous society. There are a small group of people in this country, and it is small, who hate the way we live, hate who we are, want to destroy our democracy. And, you know, the Muslim community itself are victims here, because the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful. They add to our culture, they add to our economy. But there's a small number, and I've called radical Islamism a cancer that needs to be cut out, and it is.
All right, let's take some more comments from the audience. Does anybody want to come back? Yes, the gentleman there in the front row.
Yeah. Hello, Paul. Paul, what is your attitude to places like Tower Hamlets, where you've got groups of young Islamic men wandering around telling people what to do, basically?
Yeah, I mean, it should be made perfectly clear that there is one law in this country, and that is British law, and people should sign up to British values and a British way of life.
Well, what would you do about it?
Well, it should simply not be accepted within British society, and these people should be told loud and clear that there is one rule, one law, you sign up to it when you're in this country.
And if you break the law, though, you go through the criminal justice system. So what are you suggesting? There's nothing different.
You know, well, what's going on is that these people are verbally telling people to cover up and whatnot. You know, they're not necessarily breaking the law. However, they need to be told, and it needs to be made clear, you're in Britain and you sign up to British way of life.
And internment is the answer, is it?
No, I didn't say that. No, I'm talking about internment. I also mentioned waterboarding, by the way. And I mentioned waterboarding in the case if there was going to be an imminent terrorist attack. And if we had to find out information quickly, I wouldn't take anything off the table to ensure that British women, men and children are kept safe.
Is that not rather extreme? The lady at the front.
No, Joe, I'll tell you what's extreme. People going into the Manchester arena and blowing themselves up with a nail bomb and killing 22 women and children.
But will waterboarding prevent it?
Someone driving a van last night down Westminster Bridge and mowing people over. That's extreme. That's the problem. That's what needs to be cut out.
Lady at the front.
Mr. Nuttall, hi. I think it's notable that you attempt to distinguish between Islam and Islamism, and thank you for putting that into the narrative. But how do your over-dependence on prevent strategies and things and measures like that, how do you distinguish, for example, you've suggested removing the burqa, banning the burqa.
Yeah.
You're not drawing that distinction.
No.
You're grouping these people.
No, I mean, that is a completely different thing. That's about integration. Because one thing is clear at this moment in this country, and this is proven by reports by Trevor Phillips, it's proven by reports by Dame Louise Casey. We're actually becoming a more divided society, and people aren't integrating. No, it's not. No, it's nothing to do. It's actually nothing to do with my rhetoric. It's basically down to the failed ideology of multiculturalism. That's the problem, whereby communities are encouraged to live alongside each other, but never necessarily have to mix. I'll give you a statistic. It can't be right that 22% of Muslim women in Britain either don't speak English or speak very little English. And if you're talking about the banning of face coverings, it's not just about the burqa and the niqab. We want to ban face coverings in general. So if people turn up at an EDL march, for example, they shouldn't be allowed to cover their face.
All right.
But as for the niqab and the burqa, look, I would argue two things. One, it's about security. There are numerous examples of people escaping after terrorist attacks or killings wearing the niqab or the burqa. And whether we like it or not, we're the most watched people in the world. There's more CCTV in Britain per head than anywhere on the planet. And for CCTV to be effective, you need to be able to see people's faces. Now, secondly, it's also about integration. And I would argue that to enjoy the full fruits of British society and to communicate properly, you have to be prepared to show your face.
So how does prevent integrate people?
Hang on, we're going to go get some more comments. But interesting, in France, of course, they banned the burqa and they have suffered some terrible terrorist incidents. The lady here at the front will take some more comments from the audience.
Prevent has been widely criticised for alienating communities. And I just wonder whether some of your rhetoric and the way in which you speak about Islam is in itself inciting radicalisation, because I know that if I was a Muslim sitting in this audience, I wouldn't feel particularly comfortable with some of the sweeping statements that you make.
Well, actually, I'm not saying anything negative about Islam. I'm saying negative things about Islamism. And it's Islamism which breeds these people who hate us and want to kill us, right? And we've got to do something about it. We've got to say to these people, Islamism is not welcome in Britain, and we'll no longer turn a blind eye to it. And I was glad today to hear Theresa May finally say, enough is enough. We can't allow this to continue. We've got to cut this out. And that means, as I say, put more police on the streets. It means radicalisation is rife within prisons as well. We know this. It means putting more prison officers, 7,000 more prison officers, 4,000 more border guards. We've got to ensure that our own people are safe.
All right, Paul Nuttall, let's just take another comment from the man in the middle here.
Going back to your integration policy, where I think you've mentioned that where the perpetrators of sex grooming gangs are continually targeting girls from outside their community, why do you think the UK political parties are so shy of noticing this pattern where the victims are almost always white girls, Sikh girls and Hindu girls, and the grooming gangs are almost always from a particular section of the community, i.e. Pakistani Muslims?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's because of political correctness. Other political parties and local authorities have turned a blind eye for this for far too long. And we end up in a situation like Rotherham, where we've had 1,400 girls who've been either groomed or raped or gone through terrible, terrible things. The fact is, because of political correctness, we've said nothing and we've turned a blind eye. The point is, I would argue that religion and race in these circumstances should be an aggravating factor when these cases go to court.
Right. So you actually want, because these people have been through the criminal justice system and they were convicted in the cases that you've said. What do you want to do further? You want to make their religion?
Well, in future, well, actually, religion and race in other cases are an aggravating factor, but again, when it comes to these grooming gangs, it hasn't been, and it is wrong. These girls are being picked generally because they're Hindu, they're Sikh, but predominantly they're white and they're Christian. These girls aren't being groomed from within the Muslim community.
The gentleman with the hat there, please.
Hi there, Paul. Well, my name is Kamal Mohammed. and you can guess what my religion is. On behalf of the Bristol community, Sudanese and Muslim community in general, let me just condemn the horrible and appalling attack that happened in London last night, because they do not represent I'm really glad to hear you talking positively about the Muslim community, but you also talked about trust, building trust with the Muslim community in order to tackle extremism. You like figures and numbers. Well, there's a recent research conducted by Professor Madood from the University of Bristol that says if you're a Muslim, a qualified Muslim with a degree, you have 3 times less chance to get a job that a white person can get. And that is a research, and you love figures. What can you do to tackle institutional racism? Do you want to build trust between us? Tell me now how you're going to tackle institutional racism.
Well, I'm not aware of that piece of research. If it is correct, then it is wrong. I mean, I'll give you another statistic, 16%.
Well, hang on, answer that statistic. How would you deal with racism or communities who feel they're marginalised?
Well, look, again, this is all about integration, isn't it? It's all about bringing people together.
And you think telling Muslim women to not wear the burqa and the niqab will help that integration?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do, because actually you'll be able to see people's faces and be able to communicate properly. It's quite important. But no. But what I also want to say is you've given that statistic. The other statistic on this is that 58% of Muslim women are economically inactive, 16% are unemployed. And
because you're not giving them jobs.
And again,
that's what it is.
No, but I would argue. I would argue, in a sense, you're probably right to a point, but there's also an issue around integration and Muslim women being willing to put themselves forward for jobs. And again, the burqa and the niqab precludes Muslim women from taking many forms of employment.
Burqa's got nothing to do with this.
You can't be a nurse.
The research was conducted by the BBC. Okay, so BBC and the University of Bristol, and invite you to look at it.
Right. Let me go on to the next question. Let's go to Layla King.
Do UKIP and your kind of general rhetoric and policy, do you bear some responsibility for the rise in UK terrorism? And was it a sincere and appropriate gesture to be the only party who did not suspend your election campaigning following last night's attack?
Well, obviously the Greens haven't, because you've just had the Green co-leader on this platform as well. But what I will say is it was an act of defiance. These people hate our democracy. What a great way to say you will not beat us by ensuring that our general election takes place. OK? And it continues. Look,
what about your rhetoric in terms of leading to radicalisation?
No, our rhetoric isn't leading to radicalisation. What's leading to radicalisation are places like Saudi Arabia and Qatar spreading Islamism all over the globe.
So why did one of your MEPs, Gerard Batten, call Islam, not Islamism, he called Islam a death cult? He also said it's a barbaric religion. Yeah. Do you think that helps community cohesion?
No, I don't. And actually, I think Gerard has got his terminology wrong. What I've said, and I've made perfectly clear, that extremist Islamism is a problem that we have, and that's the language I use.
I'll just go back to the questioner, Layla, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the audience.
Well, yeah, I mean, going back to one of the issues that you brought up a moment ago, Paul, in terms of the religious headdress. Now, whether or not in a separate context you think that this is a kind of practical, intangible request of a society that they should have their face visible at all times, can you not see how bringing up these kind of personal, alienating, culturally judgmental points, that it does alienate people? Now, just to give you...
Let him answer, because we need to get other people in. Go on, Paul.
Well, do you know what? This is going to happen anyway, OK? It's already happened in France, it's happened in Belgium, it's happened in Bulgaria, it's happened in the city of Barcelona.
You're the only party proposing it here.
Yeah, hold on, Joe, hold on, right? It's going to happen in Germany eventually. Angela Merkel's already talking about it. It's going to happen in Austria, it's going to happen in Holland. We can either be on the curve with this one or behind the curve.
Let's go to the lady here.
Hello, thank you. Paul, one law for all, that's what I would like in this country. And whilst we've got Sharia law saying one thing and our law saying another, I think you're going to have complete division forever and ever until we have one law for all. We'll all know what's good, we'll all know what's bad, and then move on from there.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I don't agree with Sharia councils and Sharia courts, because I don't think there's any place in British society today for a court or a council where the word of a woman is only half that of a man.
We're going to have to move on to some of the other questions. Just to be clear, of course, there is only one law in this country. There may be Sharia courts, but there is only one law that is in the eyes of the judge.
Overstepping their mark.
But just to make it clear, can we go to the next questioner, please, Andrew Carnegie? Andrew, where are you? There.
UKIP proposed to defend the NHS, yet a significant proportion of the staff who work there are immigrants.
Yeah.
Surely the greatest danger to the NHS is UKIP and Brexit.
No, it's not a danger, actually, because what we would like to see is there's 167,000 EU migrants who work in the NHS at this present moment in time. I'd like to see the government, on the day that it's elected, on June the 9th, turn around to these people and say, right, you provide a great job for our NHS, you're good for the economy, you can't stay. Simple as that, OK? As for UKIP being bad for the NHS, we're the party which is offering the best deal for the NHS out of any of the political parties. And do you know why? Because we're prepared to look at other priorities. We would like to see the foreign aid budget, which is costing the British people £30 million every single day. Slash it, OK? You slash it and we would save £11 billion a year. That money can then be transferred directly into social care and into the NHS.
What level do you want to cut it to? In your manifesto, you say you want to cut the foreign aid budget to 0.2%.
0.2% of GNI.
That won't save £11 billion. The foreign aid budget is about £12 to £13 billion.
Yes, but it will save £11 billion by the end of this term, because it's due to go up year on year. Now, even if we cut it to 0.2% of GNI, that is the same level as what America was paying under the Obama administration. And no one would suggest that America under Obama wasn't charitable. It's still more than Spain and Portugal put together. I'm sorry, we know from research and open polling, by the way, that the vast majority of people agree with us on this issue. Cut the foreign aid budget and spend British taxpayers' money on the NHS.
Again, all the other parties have signed up to that 0.7% commitment.
Yeah, but they're wrong.
The gentleman there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but you're talking complete rubbish. Somebody over there talked about institutional racism, and you represent it. I'm sorry. Listen, the health service has a huge number of people who are being affected by your approach to our society.
What, because I want to see the foreign aid budget cut?
No, because you are coming across as a polemic darkness in the way that we see ourselves. I'm sorry, but you are. You're talking about waterboarding as an example. You're talking about dragging us back to a lower level.
I'm talking about
we are better than that.
No. I'm talking, sir, about protecting I'm talking about protecting British citizens and ensuring. I'll give you an example. We're spending foreign aid. We're giving foreign aid to a country like India, which has more millionaires and billionaires than ourselves. A country which has its own space programme. A country which has its own nuclear weapons, its own aircraft carriers. I'm sorry, charity begins at home in this country.
Hang on. If your policies were so popular, Paul Nuttall, why have you done so spectacularly badly in recent elections, in the local elections, in the by-election in Stoke? You have a legitimate basis to put forward your policies, but they are not popular. People have not voted for you.
Well, firstly, I wouldn't say the Stoke by-election was spectacularly bad. We cut Labour's majority in half. As for the local elections...
I said about the local elections were spectacularly
you mentioned
bad,
both.
and Stoke by-election.
Okay.
Well, you were supposed to win it.
But hang on. With the local elections, we always knew that they were going to be the most difficult in UKIP's history. what UKIP has done is it's won the war in many ways, getting the referendum and getting Brexit. Now what we've got to do is win the peace. And why UKIP's so important, Joe, is because we have to be the country's insurance policy. I think Theresa May is going to win this election, all right? And I do, but however, I do not trust her to get a good deal for Britain when she needs to go into these negotiations. Therefore, UKIP has to be there to be the guard dogs of the Brexit that we voted for on June the 23rd last year.
Let's go to the lady there with glasses on, please.
You just mentioned that you've won the war. Presumably you mean Brexit. That's what UKIP was for. Why do we still need UKIP?
Well, for two reasons, really. I mean, I've basically just made one of the points. You know, I am not convinced whoever is Prime Minister, and I do think it'll be Theresa May, will go out and negotiate hard enough for us to get the British deal. Now, let me just make this point. If it wasn't for UKIP back in 2013, there wouldn't have been a referendum in the first place. We forced a then British Prime Minister, David Cameron, who never wanted to give a referendum, into giving one in the first place. And that's why that proves how important UKIP can be. If UKIP is on the pitch, if UKIP is strong, if it's going up in the polls, if it's winning local elections...
But it's not, that's my point.
Hold on, but sometimes, Joe, you know in politics, the tide comes in, the tide goes out. It'll come back in again. And if UKIP is there and it's strong, we can ensure that we are the Prime Minister's backbone to get the kind of Brexit deal that we want.
Let me go to the lady at the back in the corner.
Secondly, it's also important that UKIP is around because we drive the political agenda. We make the political weather in many ways. Well, actually, you know, people laughed at us within the Westminster bubble because they felt a bit uncomfortable about our integration agenda. Theresa May is now talking our language. 10 years ago, when we spoke about Brexit, people laughed at us and said it was lunacy. When we spoke about a points-based system on immigration, people said it was racist. It's now government policy for non-EU migrants.
Hang on, what is your immigration system now? You want a one-in, one-out policy. That is a gimmick, isn't it?
No, it's not a gimmick. It's not a gimmick. It's not a gimmick. Hold on, before you go there, you're going to let me answer this question.
Yes, but I do need to get some audience in. But go on, answer that.
Well, look, this is a policy called balanced migration. It was first proposed by Frank Field, the Labour MP for Birkenhead. It was supported by Nicholas Soames, the Tory MP. It basically goes like this. We want to see zero net immigration over the next 5 years. So, for example, last year, 339,000 people left Britain. That means we would let in the same sort of number. However, there would also be an Australian points-based system, so what we would get into the country are skilled migrants who'd add to the economy, add to the tax receipt. It would be good for British wages and it would be good for social cohesion in the economy all round.
Just before we go to that lady, just to be checked, so however many doctors or high-tech specialists we might need, they couldn't come to the UK unless somebody left.
But it wouldn't be 339,000 that we'd need.
Right, but that wasn't the question I asked.
No,
I'm saying,
but that's the point.
Would you have to wait for someone to leave before you get a doctor in?
No, that's the point. It's done over a 5-year period, not a 1-year period. Therefore, there's a lot of wriggle room. What we're saying isn't zero gross immigration. We're not pulling up the drawbridge. We'd still be letting in around 300,000 a year, but what we would be letting in is skilled migrants,
300,000 a year, so not the tens of thousands even on net migration?
Well, look, I mean, this is all about... No, it's zero net migration. Net, not gross.
No, net. The lady at the back.
So coming back to the point about NHS staffing shortages and your evident pride in Brexit, what's your response to figures like that conducted by the Royal College of Nursing over 2 months ago that said since Brexit there's been a 92% decrease in the number of EU migrants registering to be nurses in the UK? It's not a fact about drawing up the drawbridge, it's people not now wanting to come to the UK.
Yeah, but the majority of nurses within the NHS obviously are British, but then the next on the list are obviously non-EU migrants. Now, what we need to do is, we need to start training our own nurses up.
Right.
It cannot be right or fair that we're taking nurses from countries in Africa, for example, where 1 in 3 people have HIV.
And we'll ask in a moment how long that would take. Of course, some people say up to 10 years. The lady at the front.
We are taking nurses from some countries in Africa. No, I didn't say that. I said it's not fair that we're taking nurses from these countries when, quite frankly, they're obviously needed in their country.
I'm going to take a final comment from the audience before we move on. This lady here.
So I'm just wondering what your response is to all the economists and actually the companies that are going to pull a lot of jobs out of the UK after Brexit, and also the fact that there's a lot of studies that show that immigration is economically, beneficial for the UK. So do you not think that you're just pursuing ideology for ideology's sake and cutting immigration and Brexit?
No. What a lot of these reports haven't taken into account, and the Office for Budget Responsibility admit this in their report, which keeps getting quoted at me, that this policy had cost £6 billion a year. They admit in that report that they haven't taken into account population growth. So, for example, last year, we allowed in net a city the size of Hull. It's going to be a Birmingham every 4 years. It means that by the middle of this century, we'll have a population of 80 million people. That means there'll have to be a new hospital building programme, a new school building programme, new motorways, a new rail network. If you take into how much that's going to cost in capital investment...
Jobs, surely, or the building of all these new institutions.
Hang
how
on.
are you against this?
Hang on. If you take into account the cost of the capital investment which will have to go into keeping up with population, it's going to be massive.
Right.
We need to control the population. The only way you do that is through balanced migration.
Let's go to the next questioner, Joanna Flanagan, with your question.
Bearing in mind that you were supportive of Trump pulling out of the climate change talks, do you believe in climate change?
Well, firstly, I mean, I didn't support Donald Trump during his election. I think some of the things that he said, specifically regarding women, went way above and beyond the pale. However, hold on. Well, I don't think this Muslim ban is going to work in any way, shape or form. I don't think it's right. However, what I will say is he's actually only doing what he said he was going to do. I mean, if he didn't, what is the point producing a manifesto or a programme? Here is someone who's been elected in a democracy and is carrying out the will of the people. He said, let me finish. No, I'm going to come back to that. He said...
Do you believe in climate change?
Yes, of course I believe the climate's changing.
Right. You do believe it, and who's responsible?
A whole load of different factors.
Right, including man-made climate change.
Yeah, man obviously plays some role in the changing of the climate. However, I don't buy into the climate alarmist agenda.
All right, I'm going to have to take... We're running out of time. The gentleman at the very back there, a brief comment.
You've just said that people should stand by their manifestos. Yeah. And you introduced it by saying that you supported British values, one of which I thought was habeas corpus. When you went on to talk about detention without trial and so on, it reminded me of Bonhoeffer's thing about the Nazis, that when they came for the Jews, I did nothing because I wasn't a Jew. When they went for the communists...
It has to be very brief, the answer, because we're running out of time.
And when they came for me, there was no one left.
When are we going to realise there is a group of people in this country, MI5, say 23,000, who hate who we are, hate who we live, and want to kill us? What I want to do is ensure that things like Manchester and London last night do not become commonplace in this country.
Right, we have to say goodbye to Paul Nuttall, and thank you. Please show your appreciation. Paul Nuttall, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of this election question special here in Bristol and Bottle Yard Studios. Thank you very much to the audience from all of us here. Good night.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.